Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello, and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I am your host, Joe Grumbine, and today we are blessed to have Dr. Robert Hoffman back with us, and we're going to continue our journey to solving the cancer problem and helping people find their way to some truth and some good answers to some difficult problems. Robert, how are you doing today? It's so good to have you back.
Doing good.
Wonderful.
How are you, Joe?
So, it's a crazy journey. It's only been a couple of months since I got informed of my situation, and it's like you jump on a roller coaster ride and you're zigzagging over here and zigzagging over there, and people are telling you this and that, and don't do this, and you got to do that. And here we are, knee deep in the middle of it. Last week we were talking we got ourselves caught up a little bit about this experience, and I had just seen a radiologist or radiation oncologist. I guess I'm learning all these new terms of all these new types of doctors and science and all this stuff. So yesterday I went to the medical oncologist. So for those of you who are learning the new jargon, that's a chemo doctor. And so as we're walking down this path, we talked to a surgeon, we talked to a radiation doctor, we talked to a ear, nose, and throat guy. Now we're talking to a chemo doctor that specializes in head and neck cancers. So we're getting closer and closer to people that have experience with what I'm going through and hopefully finding some answers. And, when I talk to her, I like her. She's about probably a little younger than me. She's from someplace in the Middle East, I think maybe Pakistan or someplace in that part of the world. She's been here in America for a long time, hardly has an accent. She's been doing this medicine that she's doing now for over 10 years. And that was helpful to me because I'm looking for somebody who's got experience in what I'm dealing with. As we are learning, cancers are just so different that if you don't have somebody that's seen what you're dealing with, then you might as well just start from scratch. And after talking to her, she told me some different things than I've been hearing. So initially, I talked to the surgeon, and he was talking about doing surgery. And now I talked to the chemo doctor, or the radiation doctor I talked to next, and he was talking about possibly doing surgery, but radiation and chemo being the first moves. Now talking to the chemo doctor, she seems to think there's not going to be any surgery. She seems to think that surgery's not got a lot of value here because of the size of the tumor and the likelihood of getting it all out. Her opinion is that if you're going to cut into it, you better get it all out. Otherwise, you're going to create more work and possibly more hazard. And then she laid out an order for a chemo, and I'm trying to find the paper that I had it on, but you know the name of it. And cisplatin, that's correct. And what she told me was this, and I found it a little concerning because I didn't hear anybody else talk about this. And she said that in this case, the chemo is really to support the radiation. She says in her way of seeing this and thinking about it, the chemo by itself wouldn't do what we need it to do, but it would help the radiation to more completely do what we need it to do. And that sounded so different from what we've been talking about on the group calls. I thought to myself, man, we better talk about this, because as I'm learning, you kind of get one good shot at it. So when you're dealing with radiation, apparently there's so much radiation the body can take. So there's like not an unlimited course of action with this. You've got so many rounds to shoot and then you're done. You can't do anymore. And in the meeting that we had last Sunday, we were speaking with the doctor. Sorry, my names are not great, but one of the doctors was part of the meeting, and he was very adamant about if you're going to go and hit something with radiation and chemo, you better
Dr. Exume.
Exume. Thank you very much. I'm working hard trying to remember.
Who's a stage 4 lung cancer patient.
Exactly.
Retired surgeon, stage 4 lung cancer person. 4 years out, told he was going to die 3 years ago.
Exactly. And that's why his input's so valuable to me, because even though we don't have the same thing, it's close enough that says, well, if they told him this thing and he's getting through it, I better listen to what he's got to say, because he's done some things that they said couldn't be done. And his concern was that if you don't hit it hard enough, it can develop a resistance and possibly future treatments might not work. And especially if you're dealing with radiation, if you go after it and it doesn't knock it back, you might not have enough ammunition in your weapons to get it a second time. So we're looking at this very carefully. And so that's kind of brings us up to speed with what's happened since the last time we talked. And you know, when we were talking about a methionine restricted diet, and so for those of you who are listening, Dr. Hoffman here many, many years ago discovered a system by which cancer cells have this tremendous appetite for an amino acid called methionine, and apparently cysteine as well. And the cancer cells just eat huge amounts of this amino acid that's prevalent in our foods, especially in high protein foods. And Dr. Hoffman, you also discovered that there's this enzyme called methionine-ase, which can help to block out the absorption of methionine in the bloodstream, thus potentially weakening the cancer cells and protecting the body as a whole. There's been a lot of research that has shown that a methionine restricted diet and addition of this methionine can really cause other treatments, other therapies to work very well, and to possibly set timelines, create opportunities for people to live not only longer lives but better quality of lives. Am I saying this right?
Right on. Except I didn't discover methionine-ase, but helped develop it.
Okay, there you go. And I will continue saying this until I get it all right. I'm working on it. So
that's a minor point.
So 2 days ago, I received my first, or yesterday, I received my first dose of methionine-ase and began taking it. But frankly, all of these therapies, one of the problems that we face with cancer is that everything takes a while to work. So no matter what you do, if you've got a tumor like I've got, there's not a thing I could do to cause it to disappear tomorrow. Whatever it is I do is going to set things in motion. And at one point, we'll see results. And that's where things start getting dicey, because in some cases, you get one shot at it. And if you miss, well, then you got to, go about other sort of creative or additional, maybe more risky procedures and therapies to try to solve this problem the same. So what's your opinion based on what she came back with?
First, I want to say that we're getting there.
Okay.
And so my question for you to ask her is, what does the medical literature say regarding response and survival of chemotherapy of head and neck cancer with cisplatin, which is what the jargon calls one of the first-line therapies, and what I believe is another first-line therapy, docetaxel. That's a kind of a hard word. docetaxel.
Okay.
Chemotherapy is almost always given with more than one drug. And I believe, and we can check this with looking in the literature and checking with her, first-line chemo for head and neck cancer, I believe, is cisplatin and docetaxel. But she didn't mention that. She said cisplatin and radiation. Now,
Right.
that's called chemoradiation. She's not out of the, not in outer space. She's right on. That's one of the standard therapies. So my question is, what is the response rate for cisplatin plus docetaxel compared to cisplatin plus radiation for head and neck cancer? Response with regard to tumor shrinkage, response to what they call progression-free survival, where nothing happens, you're good, and for survival itself. So she just comes out at you. It's going to be chemoradiation, and you say, "Gee, doc, could you bring me along a little bit and tell me what's the if one is only getting chemo for head and neck cancer, is it usually cisplatin and docetaxel?" And I think that's answer is going to be pretty much yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then okay, so what's the benefit if give me the data, please. Response rate and survival. Let's keep it that way.
Okay.
Comparing cisplatin and docetaxel chemo versus radiation, or cisplatin plus radiation. I want to know.
Uh-huh.
And then the next thing I would say, hey, doc, can't we do the real full-time chemo, cisplatin and docetaxel, and then go to radiation to clean things up, where I wouldn't have to get so much radiation? Could I do that? And what's the benefit and what are the negatives of doing that? And so she
Now,
says
another point.
you're not going to need surgery. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
We don't know that.
Right.
But we're guessing that doing the correct chemo and the correct radiation is going to, if it doesn't eradicate the tumor, it's sure going to shrink the heck out of it and make you at least a much better surgical candidate for complete what they call resection, getting it all out.
Correct.
So we're much better off than we were before. We know the different kind of specialties: medical oncology, radiation oncology, surgical oncology. And that is a medical oncologist, a surgical a radiation oncologist, and a surgical oncologist. All of them can help you. And the question is, what's the order?
Right.
And I think your doc is totally right, saying just letting the surgeon go in there right now, that ain't the best way.
Right.
That tumor is way back behind your tongue, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to disfigure the heck out of you. And the chance of getting it all out as it stands now are low.
Correct.
Okay, so we got to shrink it. The minimum we got to do is shrink it, if not eradicate it.
Right.
You remember Miss Hozumi? She
Yep.
got the chemo that was actually prescribed by the surgeon, which can happen in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
With the idea of shrinking it before the surgery. And it was so shrunk, there was nothing there. The surgeon still wanted to do surgery. And she said, no, thank you. And she's tumor free for a couple of years now. So the most important thing in all of this is just pure, simple logic.
Mm-hmm.
Shrink the damn thing. So as you say, and I agree, I'm hardly an expert about radiation, but I know there's enormous side effects. And like you say, there's probably a limit. Now, regarding chemo, like, for example, cisplatin and docetaxel, it's not pleasant, but there's not a limit. Some chemo has a limit, that the chemo that affects your heart, like doxorubicin.
Right.
You can only have so much of that stuff in your life, and then you're done with it. You got to go to something else. But cisplatin, you're going to lose your feeling in your fingers. I mean, it's not pleasant, but it's tolerable. and adding some
What she said
docetaxel.
about the cisplatinum was that there was a potential for some kidney damage.
There is, but I think she'll control that.
Yeah, she said it was low, and they can manage it and
They
track
can
it.
manage. They can manage.
Yeah.
One good thing these days is there's a lot of things out there to reduce the side effects.
Yeah, she
So,
said that it was likely that I would not lose my hair with this drug, and
and you know what? Who the heck cares?
that's the last thing I care about.
Yeah.
I
So,
couldn't care less about my hair.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but I think, what's the benefit of chemo radiation versus chemo, the real chemo, the cisplatin plus docetaxel or some similar drug? And
Hmm.
what's wrong with going in sequence, getting
Right.
the best chemo possible before we hit the radiation, with the idea of not having so much radiation?
Right. And I did bring that to her, and I even mentioned the notion of proton therapy, some different things I've heard about, and just asking. I figure you can't hurt to learn more, and maybe there's
Yeah,
something somebody else didn't think about. And she raised the notion that, to talk to this radiation doctor more about that, and she didn't know the
yeah,
answer.
that's not her area.
No,
But
not at all. And
what we need to know now, and Joe, we're light years ahead of where we were a week ago.
right.
We're already got a chemo doctor ready to treat you.
Yep.
And now we got you got to just, you're an informed patient, and you want to be more informed. And you got it. What's the benefit of the full chemo, which the second drug, versus chemo plus radiation? To me, if it were me, I'd take the chemo first. Get this thing as small as possible by chemo, so
Yes.
that and the chemo, for the most part, you're going to recover almost everything.
Right.
Some peripheral neuropathy and this and this and this. There might be some bit lasting effects, but it's sure great to be alive.
Right. Exactly.
And so we got to know. We got to know. For me, this is a mystery. So just put it to her. I want the data.
Yes.
What's the difference in response rate between the 2-drug chemo or chemo plus radiation? The response rate and the survival rate. I got to know. And
Well, the
what's
good
wrong
news
with having
is,
full chemo before we have the radiation? What's wrong with that? So I don't have to have so much of that damn radiation, which is going to burn the heck out of you.
exactly. The good news is I'm working with UCI Medical Center, and they have an online portal that I'm able to correspond at least partially with the physician. So I'm going to send this message to her
Okay.
right
Can you
away.
tell me her name, please?
Yes, hang on one second. Sorry, I don't gotta look it up real quick. All these new people here.
Yeah.
It's sorry. All right. Her name is, oh no, that's the wrong one. I got all these new doctors. You know what? I will have to email it to you afterward. I don't
That's just
have,
fine.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
just fine.
So one of the things, that I'm glad about is these doctors seem to be listening at least. I told her about some of the other therapies I was talking about doing and thinking about doing, and she didn't have any issues with anything. She just said, don't go doing a bunch of antioxidants and things that could get in the way of the chemo. But I told her about, some of
You don't
the
want antioxidants anyway. That just
exactly.
feeds the cancer.
Agreed. And so, so it's one of these things that when people think they hear words about healthy and they think this antioxidant's a good thing. Well, in some
If you
cases
don't
it
have
might be.
cancer, they're great.
Right. But when you
The
do,
whole
it's
world
not.
changes when you have cancer.
Yeah. So we go the other way around. We throw a bunch of oxygen at it and we say, go ahead, go live in the oxygen that you don't want to live in. And it's a different way of thinking. But the point was she was not opposed to any of the things that I was telling her about. She seemed to be okay with my, eagerness to learn and solve this thing. I have an appointment tomorrow now for a CT scan. So the issue is, for those of you who are listening but can't see, I've got this giant tumor sticking out of my neck. And what happens when these things start getting bigger, they want to spread. And if that happens, things get ugly pretty quick. So they're going to do a CT scan of my chest tomorrow morning at 6 in the morning to see if there's any signs of it spreading. If it hasn't, then that's obviously the best news ever, and we can really start getting aggressive as quickly as possible so that it doesn't happen. But in my opinion, the good news is I've already taken some actions to hopefully curtail that by getting on this low methionine diet and taking the methionine A's and all these other things I'm doing. Hopefully are going to push back and keep it from spreading while we jump into these aggressive therapies. And that's a bit of it. Now, there's one more piece of the puzzle. I have an appointment next Wednesday with Dr. Castro. And Dr. Castro was referred to me by you, Dr. Hoffman, and he works with some innovative therapies, and he works with some genetic sequencing of tumors and working on creating some customized formulations to help people. And this is huge. This is like exponential growth from where we were 5-10 years ago. Because for those of you who don't know anything about cancer, there isn't a cancer. Everybody's cancer is very unique to their own genome and their own biome. And there's only one answer for each person. Well, probably multiple answers, but there's one unique problem for each person. And to think that, these broad spectrum answers can solve everybody, it just doesn't make sense knowing the complexity of the problems. So what we're doing now is we're learning to get deeper and deeper and to start looking closer at these things and creating some creative and, unique formulations. And for me right now, you get yourself in a situation where your life's in danger, you start thinking differently. So all these things that I might have not wanted to spend any time on, well, today it's a whole nother set of priorities. So I'm looking forward to talking to Dr. Castro and seeing what he has to say about this as well.
And Joe, I want you to ask him this question too. He's
Okay.
going to come up with some more personalized therapy, I think, and that could be added on, and that's just great. But I would like his opinion of sort of half chemo radiation versus real full-blown chemo, and then possibly radiation following.
Okay. I'm writing all this down so I get all this stuff
He'll
down.
give you a good answer. He's probably going to want to do he's probably going to want to sequence your DNA.
Right.
And hopefully you've had a biopsy, no?
I have.
Where is that material? Where?
I'm assuming it's at the lab at UC or Riverside, the clinic where they took it out. I don't know the
Okay,
answer.
I'm sure it is. Okay.
I'm still in touch with that doctor, so I can find that out if we need to.
Well,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the first things that Dr. Castro is going to suggest is we need to do some DNA sequencing here, or even some RNA sequencing to see which genes are active.
Right.
That's where that's his big strength. His biggest strength is his open mind.
Okay. Well, we need that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And then finally, I've got a dentist appointment on that same day that I'm going to go out to Dr. Castro. So I'm going to be zipping to the dentist in the morning and off to him in the afternoon.
Terrific.
And that's so that they can create a cage to put my head in for the radiation. So when they radiate you, you got to sit real still, and they basically screw your head down to the table so you can't move. And that way they don't accidentally blast something they don't want to blast.
Well, Joe, honestly, I'm hoping that you'll get some full-blown chemo before the radiation.
Yes.
And that will enable, hopefully, a lot less radiation being necessary. That's my hope.
Agreed. And you know what's
we surely need Dr. Castro's input. We also need your medical oncologist, chemo doc, to answer this question. What's the advantage?
Right.
The combination chemo versus radiation versus just one drug plus radiation
Right.
at the same time, which doesn't really give that. To me, that means you're going to probably, if you're just going to take the cisplatin plus radiation, I'm guessing you're going to get the full, dose of radiation.
Well, that's what they want to
if
do.
we
They
have
want
to
to
do
hit
that,
me.
we have to do that. But I think my opinion is try to avoid that.
Agreed. That's what I'm thinking too. And as I'm coming to, understand what these things mean, up until a few weeks ago, when I heard the term chemotherapy, to me, I just said automatically, it's terrible, it's evil, we can't have it. Now I'm looking at it as a totally different
Your
tool.
survival depends on it, Joe.
Exactly. And it's a totally different way of thinking. So those of you who are listening to me, they're going, who is this Joe? I'll tell you what, this is a Joe who's learning some truths and we're walking through and talking about them. And I think it's important for people who, have opinions about things. When things get serious and your life gets in danger, you need to open your mind and you need to think about facts, truths, and logic. And Dr. Hoffman keeps bringing up logic, and it's so important. Not everything that a professional tells you is going to be logical or make sense. And it's up to us, the patients, the advocates, the people that are affected by this, to be able to filter this. And sometimes you need to raise your hand and say, hey, what about this? And that's what I'm doing here right now. And I'm hoping that the listeners that are going through similar things, hey, I tell you what, there's a weekend or every Sunday we have a group meeting. It's a Zoom, and I am putting the link to that in the show notes for this. So if you're listening to this and you want to come on, it's Pacific time, 4 p.m. on Sundays. It's an amazing group, 20 or so patients, people that are going through, have gone through, and are taking care of people, sharing their experiences, just a wealth of information. This is where the true science is happening. People are sharing their real-time experience about their truths and powerful stuff. I encourage anybody that's going through this, whether you're diagnosed or you're taking care of somebody, knowledge is power, people. We have to spend our time sharing the information, learning it, and let's take some very positive, important steps. And who knows, in a year, 2 years, 10 years, maybe we'll find some answers, and some of these almost difficult, impossible problems might have some cookie cutter solutions based on the work we're doing here. What do you think?
Sure.
Well, Robert, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so grateful
Me
that
too, Joe.
I've met you, and we're sharing this information, and I'm hoping that people are learning. And it takes all of us to jump in and share the knowledge that we're getting, and let's solve these problems.
You bet.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. We'll talk to you all
Thank
next
you,
time.
Joe, and see you Sunday.
All right, looking forward to it.
Me too. Thank you again.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right, well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.